Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this edition of the Dean's Dialogues. My name is Allison Koppelman, and I'm the Associate Dean for External Affairs here at the Law School. Today's conversation features Dean Adam Chilton and Professor Kimball Dean Parker as they dive into the Law School's new AI lab, a hands-on seminar where students are building real legal tools to tackle real problems. This fall, the lab is focused on housing law with students creating an AI chatbot and legal database to help renters and landlords across the country. Dean Chilton has been a driving force behind bringing innovative interdisciplinary work into the law school, and we're excited to see how this new initiative continues that momentum. Joining him is Kimball Dean Parker, a lecturer in law at the law school. Kimball's work sits at the intersection of law, technology, and public service. In 2017, Kimball launched LawX at BYU Law School, a legal design lab where students build tools for people who can't afford lawyers. The lab has produced free resources that have helped thousands of people facing eviction, debt collection, and asylum challenges. He later co-founded 650 with Wilson Sonsini. The company uses automation and AI to help businesses navigate employment law and builds pro bono tools that have supported tens of thousands of individuals. And I, of course, have to note that he is a distinguished alumnus of this law school. Please join me in welcoming Dean Chilton and Professor Parker for what I am sure will be a really enlightening conversation.
Everyone, thanks for being here today for our conversation and our Dean's Dialogue with Kimball Parker. Now, the law school, I think part of our tradition has been both being the first to innovate in a range of areas around legal education, and also trying to be uniquely focused on producing law students that are prepared for the practice of law. Now, that kind of tradition includes the school's early incorporation of movements like law and economics or interdisciplinary legal studies. But it's continuing today with us trying to embrace and understand how generative AI is going to change the practice of law. Now, at the law school, for us, that means a range of things that we've been working on. We are trying to incorporate generative AI into the way that we teach first-year legal research and writing. We've also worked to get access and licenses to AI tools for our students. So we have licenses for Harvey AI and Spellbook AI and Visa AI that are available to our students. Our clinical programs are incorporating AI into their clinical work with the students. And we also have a range of upper level classes that focus on the regulation of AI, the practice of AI, the incorporation of AI into legal work as well, that students can pick from as part of their upper level courses. But one thing that I'm particularly excited about, and I think is uniquely innovative, is the launch of the new AI lab that Kimball's spearheaded, ran, developed, and launched that's already doing fantastic work. So I wanted to ask Kimball to tell us about what the AI Lab's all about and what it's doing today as part of this Dean's Dialogue. Now, before we get to that, though, Kimball, can you start by telling us about how you ended up at the law school and what the law school was like during your time here and how your experience was?
Yeah, I attended law school here. I graduated in 2013. I actually, we ended up, my wife and I ended up coming to Chicago because we were both applying to kind of graduate schools at the same time. I had actually been admitted to another law school. I had been admitted to Boston University, but my wife was admitted to the public policy program here at the University of Chicago. So we kind of had to decide, like, oh, where are we going to go here? And we ended up deciding to kind of prioritize my wife's education. And then I basically redid all of my applications so that I could try to get into the University of Chicago. And it worked out. So we both attended here at the same time. That was really exciting for me because actually my family has like a history with the University of Chicago. My grandpa was a law professor, and he started his career as a Bigelow fellow with the law school. He then went on to teach at the University of Colorado and was like a founding professor at BYU Law School. But he started his education here. And actually, my father was like an infant in Hyde Park when he did that. So it was, University of Chicago has kind of always had this place in my family. And so it was such a thrill to go there. And then actually, my little brother went here as well, just a couple of years after me. So there's a long line of Parkers that have run through this place.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So when you were in the law school, did you take a lot of classes related to generative AI? Was that a focus of yours?
Yeah, the generative AI was not a thing. I mean, the word generative and the word AI were things. They just had never been put together as as a different thing. I do think actually one of the classes, well, it wasn't a class actually. It was what like one of the experiences that I had in the law school that really like shaped my career and how I think about the law is that I worked on the comparative constitutions project with Professor Tom Ginsburg. So for anybody who doesn't know what that project is, basically, Professor Ginsburg arranged to like collect every known constitution in the world, and then with like a group of people, then combed through every constitution and like labeled them and coded them and like put them in this database to figure out like what constitutions have what rights and how that compares to actually how those countries um, work in the real world. And I was in charge. I coded all of the constitutions or a lot of the constitutions in Ecuador. Ecuador had like 30 plus constitutions from dating back. And so I like read them and coded them. And I also helped him find other languages. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A lot of my friends and family have like served missions. I remember there was one time Tom Ginsburg was like, there's only 100,000 Lithuanian speakers out of Lithuania. And I was like, I know three. And so I arranged like a lot of translators to read through these constitutions in their native language and then to code them. But then seeing like what data he was able, like what he was able to do with that data was just incredible. And like all of the academic research that's come from that, and like all the incredible insights from that project, I think really kind of changed the way that I think about the law because I think, I'd always kind of thought of the law. I grew up again with kind of like a family that was in the law. I always thought of the law as like paragraphs and sentences. And and I really then started to kind of think of the law as like data and logic. And really after law school, I like wanted to explore that. Like, how can you break the law down into logic and into data, and what can you do with that? And generative AI now in the past 3 years has just put that on steroids. But thinking of the law like that really, I think, kind of dates back to that time working on that comparative constitutions project.
Yeah, so this is something we share in that I found that initial line of work wildly inspiring. And so much of my own research has then been on empirically studying comparative constitutional law, but then taking that same approach to antitrust and competition law and migration policies and investment policies. And the same idea that we can take legal texts and try to categorize and code them and make it easier to study the way that they diffuse and the impact that they have. So yeah, that resonates with me, that kind of project being really influential. So concretely then, you were a student here, you participated in the Comparative Constitutions Project, you learned about thinking of the potential of turning law into data. But what did you do after you go graduate? What's the path that you take?
I worked at Quinn Emanuel as a litigation associate for a couple of years. I had an incredible experience there. I loved it. I worked under a guy named Bob Feldman, who's kind of at the later end of his career, but he gave me some like great opportunities. Is now kind of a lifelong friend. But during that time, I was in the Bay Area, and I got with a friend who was at Google, who's like a guy who worked in there with kind of data within Google. And we like came up with this crowdsourcing idea to like crowdsource the logic of the law. And really bad business, but a kind of fun idea. And so basically, people could go on and they could like visually map the logic of the law. So it's like, oh, this patent infringement breaks into these four factors, and those factors break into subfactors here. And um, and so you could kind of see how the logic of the law kind of like spreads out and what the key factors were in it. And then anybody could contribute. Anyway, we called that co-counsel. Um, which now is the name of a Westlaw product. But and that got some like interesting traction among academics and like kind of like the nerdy area of the law of lawyers who were kind of into it, but really didn't make any money. And but one of the people who saw that and worked on it was actually a Chicago alum who was the dean of the law school at BYU, Dean Gordon Smith. And so he did it with some like business formation principles. But anyway, when he became the dean, he thought like, hey, let's do like some innovative technology things with the law. And I think I was like literally the only person who he knew that had ever done any kind of like law technology thing. And so we schemed up this idea called LawX within BYU to like basically like pick an area of the law that people really had a hard time navigating without an attorney and try to like break that law down into its logic and data and see if we could like build a thing to help those people, like a software solution to help those people. And so the first term that we ran that class, we chose debt collection, which is just like an incredible issue in the state of Utah. There are 70,000 debt collection lawsuits a year, and which makes up about 2/3 of all lawsuits filed in the state. So if you look at the population that's sued for a debt, 98% of them cannot afford an attorney, which is not a surprise. And as everyone knows from their civil procedure class, basically when you're sued, you have 21 days to respond to that lawsuit in writing or you lose. And so the default rates were like 80%. And so we thought like, answering lawsuits actually not that complicated. There's only 3 potential answers, really. You can say, I agree with everything, which is admit. I disagree with anything, something in there, that's deny, and I don't know. And so we basically like created this TurboTax type automation system that just walked someone through the basics of like the logic of responding to a lawsuit. And we called it Solo Suit, which is kind of a dumb name. But we kind of thought like, gosh, I hope like 50 people a year use this thing. And so we released it and it just got like incredible usage. In fact, it like broke our servers. We had to like refactor things and expand the capacity of the tool. But now like over 300,000 people have used that tool.
Wow,
And
fantastic.
I think that was like, like a light bulb moment of thinking like, geez, if you break the law down into its logical components, you can kind of rearrange it and reconfigure it into a way that can make it more accessible to people. I think especially, at that time it was like, wow, you can get it down to people who were sued for a debt, like, and thousands of people can use it and kind of make it through it. And anyway, that experience that caught the eye of Wilson Sonsini. And so
This is how you go from creating LawX at BYU, being focused on the access to justice problem and how law and tech can improve access to justice, initially with a focus on debt collection, maybe primarily in Utah, leads you to Wilson Sonsini. And so what happens there? This is what becomes 650?
Yeah. Again, kind of following that genesis, it kind of started with co-counsel, that kind of like wonky crowdsourcing logic thing that then led to this opportunity at BYU, and the BYU thing that went well. And then Doug Clark, who is also a U Chicago alum, he's the managing partner of Wilson Sonsini. He kind of had this idea that maybe we could use that same methodology we used at LawX of kind of breaking down the law, putting it into like some kind of logic system to help people through the logic of it. But that maybe you could build like a SaaS, like a software as a service business, where you could take things that usually like a person would do and that would be service revenue, and that you could turn it into like technology software revenue. Part of the thinking behind this is like, if you look at the multiples that the valuations of companies, a software company gets much higher valuations than a service company. You know, and the reason is because like a lot of those valuations are based on like how easy is it for you to make money and to continue making money. And so, with a person, obviously you have to like service that with a person who's expensive. But with a software, that's why the software multiples for the valuations are bigger because you can scale that up and every person is just a marginal cost on the cost of on top of building the software. Anyway, so his idea was like, let's build a software service that does some legal things and see if we can get software valuation for something that we currently do as a service. So we basically like looked around the law for things that we could turn into a subscription software service. And we started like with privacy law, and that was like pretty good, especially around the time when those new privacy laws came out in around 2018 and 19. But the pandemic hit, and we started to like focus on employment law. And like employment law is just such a crazy area of law.
Hold on, is there a connection between the pandemic hitting and employment law? Is there a reason that became
Yes.
more interesting then?
Yeah, it is because during the pandemic, employees started to move. And so like remote work became more of a thing. And so like even within 650, we were a small company. We went from having people in 2 states to 10 states, and we only had 25 people.
Got it.
So
So people from Bay Area or Utah or whatever are going to Idaho and Colorado and things like
exactly.
this.
Yeah, they're moving back home. Their family's from Ohio and they want to move back home.
Yeah,
Or they want to move somewhere cheaper and they want to live out and kind of have a lower cost of living.
sure.
Uh,
Okay.
and so people started to move all over the place. That creates a big problem because every single state and sometimes even cities and counties have different laws. And so, as we kind of looked into that issue, we were like, "Geez, this is so. How does any business do this?" And just immediately, I thought of the Comparative Constitutions Project. I was kind of like, "We should do Comparative Constitutions Project employment law and like look at every law, catalog it." Tag it, put it in a database, see what we can do with that data. We started that about 3 years ago. So we started to like summarize all of these laws, tag them, label them, and put a data structure around it so that you could search it and find insights into it. And it took us years, and we basically created this database of employment laws, and that kind of became the core of the 650 offering, which basically, right now allows companies to like research the law, also to create the documents they need to be compliant with the law and to do, some compliance tracking stuff. But it's really kind of built around that idea of like turning the law into logic and data and gleaning insights from it. And so that's kind of the journey of 650. And then we were acquired about 6 months ago.
Got it.
Uh,
One thing that's sort of unique in this, right, is that Doug Clark, again, as you mentioned, who's one of our alums and the chairperson of Wilson Sonsini, you connect with him and then you incubate a company under a law firm. Is that the way to think about what happened here and
yeah,
what's going on? And
they set it up in a really interesting way. We were not set up to like really even service their clients. Like we weren't an ancillary service for them. We weren't a tool to make attorneys work more efficiently. They have those too. But this thing was a standalone startup. They basically just like started this company. They formed it as an LLC under Wilson Sonsini. It was like a fully owned subsidiary. But then they issued options to me and to all the employees to basically set it up like a startup would. So all the incentives were like a startup. We had a stake in it, and then they really left us alone. They left us alone, and they kind of pointed us in the direction of what would be good SaaS metrics, like good metrics for a startup software company. So like this percentage of growth and this percentage of retention and how efficient our marketing dollars should be and everything. they also pushed us to like create like as meaningful as technology as possible. And so, but those were really kind of like the two main guidelines. And then they just let us be and make our own decisions. And it was really interesting. I think if there's a famous business book called The Innovator's Dilemma from a professor called Clayton Christensen, and they just like followed that model exactly. There's like a quote in there that's basically like with few exceptions, like the only times where an established firm has staked a claim in a new innovative technology is by creating an autonomous unit to go after it that's kind of like has its own economics and is not tied to the economics of the parent company. And that's what they did. They like set it up just perfectly in line with that book. And it worked out. I think like we were able to innovate, we shifted and pivoted all over the place like a startup does until we like found our market, created a product that really like hit on the need of those customers, had a completely different economic model than the firm. And and then it worked out that we got a lot of users, we were able to maintain them and eventually we were acquired.
It's interesting that example. I was in an unrelated conversation this morning with another alum who's working on a book right now about law firms adapting to AI and referenced Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma to say every big current law firm is trying to invent a faster horse and buggy to maintain the pyramid partnership associate structure. Meanwhile, AI is going to flatten it and change it. And like you said, not the existing firms may not be well structured to make the change. So it's interesting that Wilson Sonsini thought to incorporate generative AI in different ways into the legal practice, that they had to create a separate autonomous unit of you and your colleagues to try to get this up and running.
Yeah, and I think, out of all the firms in the nation, I think if you were to pick, that's probably the firm that would do it. I mean, that they kind of are the firm for startups, and they've seen so many startups, especially like software companies. I mean, they founded Google and brought them public, and Apple and brought them public, and Twitter and Lyft and SpaceX and all these companies have kind of run through Wilson Sonsini, and so like you kind of couldn't think of a better firm to do that. And also very innovative firm. I think there's some interesting aspects of that firm. There are a lot of projects like this going on in the firm, and not all of them are successful. I think like you also kind of have to have, as a firm, a little bit of an appetite to have things not work out. And so like some of them work out like marvelously. Like they 650 was a great investment for them, but other things they've put money into and they haven't worked out. But Wilson is willing to do that, and I think like a lot of that's Doug Clark, who is kind of like thinking about the way that law firms are structured and how to take advantage of these technologies. He's a really kind of visionary leader there, I think.
Got it. Okay, so you're doing the project at BYU. You then go do a startup under Wilson Sonsini of 650. You're a startup CEO trying to generate the first of its kind AI product around employment law. You started at least sometime before the pandemic, and then 6 months ago you're acquired. So you've got 5 years in or something like that of developing this startup, getting it to market, getting it acquired. You're still though at least your day job, right? You're still the CEO of 650.
I am.
In addition to this, and now that you're acquired, decided to start up the AI lab at the University of Chicago. So tell us about the decision to start this and what you envisioned.
Well, I think that AI, obviously, you can see it, and we built some incredible AI tools at 650. When that technology started to come out, we were able to like leverage this database that we had created to build some like really reliable, helpful AI tools that now have been used like tens of thousands of times among our customers. But like those are for businesses, 650 is really for businesses that have money. And I think that's like when you're building a startup, like you're looking for customers that have money. I think that the hard thing about the law is that like most of the people that need help do not have money. And so like just some interesting stats about Utah, for example, only 1 in 7 lawsuits in Utah involve a lawyer against a lawyer. So like 6 out of 7 cases, there is a pro se person on the other side. That was shocking to me because like when I practiced law, I never saw a case where there was a pro se litigant. Like I only lived in 1/7 world. But like the vast majority of cases, and this is not just true of Utah, it's around the nation, are people trying to navigate it. And and actually a lot of those situations are just like so sad. Um, like, they involve uh, people that are whose lives have kind of become dysfunctional. And, they get into financial situations that they can't get out of. Or like, I think the worst problem is housing. They don't understand their rights, or, they make poor decisions and they get evicted and they don't know what to do, and maybe don't know how to protect themselves. And so I've wanted to bring that technology that has been so impactful to these companies at 650 to people. And it's very hard to start a business around that because again, it's not a customer base that's easy to monetize. But like that shouldn't keep that group away from the benefits of AI. And so there are things that you can do with AI now, obviously, that like you just could never do before. Like 5 years ago, if you wanted to get your lease analyzed, you would have to hire somebody to do it. Or you'd have to find somebody who knew something about the law to help you do that. And now with AI, you can do that virtually for free. Some tokens that you pay OpenAI. And so I think I wanted to do something like this with AI at a law school, to try to attack like an area that could really benefit people, not companies, people. And so that was the inspiration of that. I came to Dean Miles, about a year and a half ago with this idea, thinking like, let's build something just incredible for people here. And so, that was kind of the thinking behind it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you picked building this thing at the University of Chicago. But all right, so you come to Tom with this idea. You want to set up the AI lab. Let's be concrete now. So what is the AI lab? Like how many students do you have? How are you teaching them? And then let's get into the substance, what you're actually building.
So what the AI lab is we basically I picked a topic before the term. And with a group of I think we capped it at 9 students, but then there was a waiting list and some very excited students, so we added more. So I think there's 11 or 12 in the class now. We are going to build in one term an AI solution that helps with that issue. And like, so, we're going to basically the goal is to like hack away at it, build a really meaningful tool and push it out. So like not just the building of the tool, but the delivery of the tool to the population who needs it. Which actually, that second part is the hardest part. That's the harder part of the two. Between the building and the distribution, I think that the distribution is harder, is harder to get right. And so we're just going to do this in one term. This isn't like a multi-term thing. At the end of the term, we are releasing this thing, and it'll live or do well or not do well. But we are releasing it. In fact, we're releasing it on December 5th. So like next month, almost exactly a month from tomorrow, we are going to release this tool to the public. So that's the idea of the class, is like we're going to create this AI tool for people. And I think, the goals of it are to help as many people as possible. There are 40 million rented properties in the United States, 40 million. So there are like tens of millions, potentially 100 million people who are like touched by leases, in any given year. And so, and landlord tenant is the most difficult area because one, it's just like employment law. Every state, sometimes even cities and counties have different rules about the landlord-tenant relationship. You can be in San Francisco and you can have completely different rules than you do in Palo Alto. And so that's hard for landlords and it's hard for renters. The other hard thing for a renter is that it's not just the law, it's the lease. To like really understand your rights, you have to understand the lease and the law. And so I think one really exciting thing about AI is that like before, to understand those two sides of it, you'd have to hire someone to like figure that out. And now with AI, it can give you insights of your lease and the law where you are, pretty easily actually. And so anyway, so that's kind of the thought. That's the thought behind the class. And then the students get to kind of play with AI. Now, let me say, actually, like I think that my thinking on that is like completely changed. Which is like these students that are coming in just have a completely different posture with AI than I have. I think like I'm 41 years old, so I've had like decades in analog world, I would say. Like some of these students are coming in and they're like AI native. And so like the way they think about AI and the way that I think about AI, I've learned is just like completely different. Like their mind is much more open to what AI can do than mine in a lot of respects. I have one student, Adan Ordonez, who basically just like can do anything with AI. He has coded the entire app that we have already. He did it through AI tools. So there's like an AI tool called Cursor AI where you can code the thing, set up the entire infrastructure of it, and like had a prototype up in like 4 days. Like an incredible prototype. And like, so anyway, what these students are bringing, I think I kind of thought like, hey, this will be great. They'll come in this class and I will teach them about AI and we'll build this thing together. And it's kind of more like they're coming in. They know more about it, really, AI than I do in a lot of ways. And like, I almost think I'm getting more out of it than they are by seeing like what their minds are coming up with this thing.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, that's
fascinating.
fantastic. And I think also a common experience teaching our students is immediately realizing how much they already know and that you're learning from them about all sorts of topics. Now, normally I think our quarter system is a big advantage, but when you're trying to spin up and release a tech product within a quarter instead of a semester, I realize that's a bit tight. Now, you do already, though, as you just alluded to, already have a prototype or
I do.
a version that you've already developed in the first 5 weeks of the quarter or so.
We
Can
have a
you
version
show
of it. Yeah, and I can kind of show you, I can share my screen and kind of walk through it and show you how that works. And again, all of this was coded and created by students in the class. So like we didn't hire engineers or anything like that. Like this is all with the skill of the students that are already in that class. Um, so I'll share my screen here. The tool that we build is called LeaseWise. We may actually end up changing that name. We're trying to figure out exactly what the best name is for it, but right now it's called LeaseWise. You can get to it and play with it at this URL, getleasewise.com. And how it works is, so you can see kind of the branding of it. Again, all this is created by students in the class, especially by Adan Ordonez, who I had mentioned. But you click this thing, analyze your lease. You then get a lease here. Let's see, I have one ready. You upload it into here. You put your name. You put your email address. This is so that basically we know who's using it, but you don't have to create an account. So we tried to like cut down all barriers into the use of this thing. You put your property address, and then that's it. Now, what the AI is doing is it's like taking this PDF that I uploaded, it's extracting the data from it, and it's feeding it into AI using a method called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So it's basically the AI is now like combing through it, and it's going to analyze it, but it's also going to like if you ask questions, it's going to like rely on that to give you answers. So this takes a few minutes. I've already actually uploaded this lease. So this is like a cooking show. I've already like baked this thing.
Okay, got it.
But it'll take 5 minutes or so to do, but this is the result. So it'll give you like some key lease terms. So say like, oh, here's the person
Got it.
leasing
So
it
this is an apartment here in Chicago.
in Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a lease of an apartment here in Chicago.
And then it shows you Google Street View to start. It pulls that up for you.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
It'll show you your apartment, which is kind of which is a fun touch there.
Got it. All right. So it's pulled out from it the rent, the lease start, the lease end, et cetera.
Yes, some of the financial terms, what like late rent, what are the rules around late rent, some utilities, what do those look like? Some basic like rules and policies like smoking, what about animals? Like, common questions that people kind of have about their lease. What does early termination look like? There's a buyout fee here. This next section will show you some red flags. We're like, maybe there's some excessive liability here for tenants for termination. So we'll kind of like raise some things that maybe you should be aware of here. Also, the kind of tenant liability for damages. It's like, maybe be careful with this apartment. This section is really incredible. This is like some of the power of AI. We will give you some basic like rules, like we'll give you the legal structure of where you're located. So it's like, what are the, security deposit rules? And in Chicago, they have to give you your security deposit back in 45 days. So like this will help you kind of like understand what your basic rights are in the place where you're located.
So how are you doing that part of this? So I don't actually get the tech, but I get the idea that you gave it a PDF and it can extract from the PDF, your start date and your end date and your rental amount, things like this, and what you can do with animals. But now you're having to go and take the fact that it's a Chicago address and then match that to the local rules, the Chicago Municipal Code 512080, to compare this terms of the lease into the security deposit terms. So how are you like getting all of the laws for this? And can you do this for everywhere now, or is that part of the project? How's that work?
So let me tell you like one big advancement in AI that just happened recently, which is that before, like even with 650, if you layer AI over a curated data set, the AI will perform more accurately. So there are kind of ways to layer the AI over a data set to say like, only look at this data when you're generating a response to a question. And so like at 650, we layer the AI over our employment law data set, and we think it's like the most accurate tool on the market. Now, OpenAI released ChatGPT 5 recently. And so over time with each model, the delta between the base model and a model that rags over a data set has been diminishing. And with ChatGPT 5, with the right prompting, which is like, it's more complicated than you'd think, like how these things are set up with the prompting. But with the right prompting, you can get pretty close to the same accuracy as if you layered it over a database. And that is a development in the last like just several months. So basically from the time that we launched AI Lab to now, the AI has changed in a significant way. where it's not even clear that you even need a database like that anymore to generate accurate answers. And one of the advantages of this is that so, in the beginning of the semester, we thought let's create a database of all the rules in the United States, just like we did at 650. And, I think that we've kind of looked at this and been like, this is very accurate, actually. And it's not clear that all of that squeeze is worth the juice that we're going to get out of it. Now, let me say, we are still building that database. But I think that one advantage of just relying on the accuracy of ChatGPT-5 now is that that will dig into the rules in any jurisdiction in the United States. Like you're in San Antonio, Texas, it will drill down into the rules of San Antonio, Texas, or Cincinnati, or Pittsburgh. Our class may not in the amount of time be able to reach that scope, and then the tool will be limited to certain jurisdictions. But having ChatGPT-5 over it, with actually pretty minimal restrictions, but a lot of prompting, can produce very accurate answers there. And so that's what this is. This is basically relying on some clever prompts that Adon put together, and on top of ChatGPT-5.
Got it. Okay, so the vision is that eventually that this is going to be available, ideally, if it's possible, for the whole United States, but at least more jurisdictions than Chicago, and between pulling in the law directly as part of the people in the class in the AI lab, but also using the ChatGPT-5's sort of understanding reasoning. So let me ask, so it has these sorts of things that it's pulled out of there and gives advice. Is there a way that you can ask it questions if you have a legal issue that comes up or something like that? And or is that at least part of the vision?
That is. So this is the initial results, analysis results. If we go here, chat with the lease, this is where you can ask any question about your lease. So you can say are pets allowed in my apartment? It's thinking, it'll answer to the extent that it can and provide you the clause, basically where in the lease it is. So pets and animals are not allowed in the apartment without prior written permission of the owner. This is stated in the second excerpt on page 55. This is like a 64-page lease. And then it'll give you, it'll point you right to the clause in the lease that governs that. And so right now, again, this is just the incredible accessibility that AI provides here. And so you can ask it basically any questions about your lease, and it's using retrieval augmented generation over that lease and can answer any questions about your lease. And then the last thing that it does, and we're still working on this, but it'll help you draft letters about certain topics to your landlord. So if you are leaving and you want to get your rent deposit back, you click this thing. This will extract some of the info already based on the lease. It'll extract the name of the landlord's address, any additional details. So say I have maintained the property perfectly. It is clean and intact. Generate the letter. The amazing thing is AI can understand any grammar or spelling mistakes you put in there because it's smart. So you misspell intact, doesn't matter. Here we go. And here's a draft letter for you. They're basically saying please give me my deposit back. It's a nice letter. It's a nice starting point. You then can edit the letter and say no, you know what? I want to send it to 922 Military Drive, Salt Lake City, Utah, whatnot. And then you can save the changes and download it and send it off to your landlord. And so this will basically, we want to give visibility into the law and the lease, and we also want to help you like assert your rights when you need to in a respectful, nice way with your landlord. And so, again, this will like kind of pull some of the days. So you can see, as per the lease agreement, 45 days from the date, basically you need to give me it back, minus any deductions. And you have to also itemize all of those deductions, which is in the law. And so, this kind of like gives you a base first draft that'll assert your rights in the way that's prescribed by the law and the lease.
Wow, that's impressed. Fantastic. And I can imagine, to where you started, for someone that's less familiar with the legal system, that doesn't know their rights, the thought of writing your own letter like that in a professional, straightforward way and making it this easy could be extremely useful for a lot of people. All right,
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
some time for some Q&A. I already have some questions that people have been submitting through the Q&A feature.
yeah,
But to
yep.
the extent people have additional questions, please go ahead and add them. But here's a few people have already asked, and I got to say, I am curious about one: how accurate is this, or how should we think about accuracy and hallucinations? And then, relatedly, and this is maybe the part that speaks to me as the dean of the law school, what happens if there are mistakes? Who's liable? Or are we liable? Or how does malpractice work for a chatbot?
Yeah, great question. Let's talk about the accuracy first. So
Yeah.
one of the things that we're doing is we're benchmarking the accuracy of this as we speak. So like this, let me go back to this. This section here that runs through your rights, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We basically, so we have several categories: deposits, rent increases, what are the rules there, maintenance and repair rules, entry and privacy rights. And so we've had students then generate several leases, run through those leases, and check the accuracy of it. Based on our kind of like initial, like the first pass at it, this is a very accurate tool. It's like over 90% accurate. The errors, interestingly, are often like wouldn't create liability for you, basically, if you relied on them also. So it like makes errors in very interesting ways. So anyway, the accuracy we're pretty happy about, actually. I think like compares with some of the most accurate tools on the market. Now, the liability part, we think largely can be taken care of through disclaimers, which we're basically creating. This is like part of the next phase of the class also, but basically like a robust set of disclaimers for the tool. So that basically people know and have to agree to that they know that this was generated by AI, that AI can create, can occasionally make errors. Basically, the same sort of like AI disclaimers that you would find on Claude or ChatGPT or like some of the major AI tools. They deal with a lot of that liability through like forced disclaimers. If you use Claude, you have to agree to certain disclaimers before even like entering the tool. ChatGPTs are a little looser than that. But we're basically going to make sure that people understand what they're getting here.
Got it.
Which is
so
like,
people
this is
can
an AI generated thing.
And people will disclaim away the idea that this is not legal advice or something like this, or whatever it is, the relevant language we need to make sure people get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like what constitutes legal advice now in the age of AI is an interesting question. There have been no challenges really to what ChatGPT and Anthropic and all of those tools produce. Any person can go on and ask it any legal question, and it will answer it.
Yes.
With those disclaimers, like what does that even mean for the practice of law practically? And this distinction we have between like what's legal information and what's legal advice. But this will have a higher bar of disclaimers than you would see in an Anthropic or or a chat GPT. So we'll be kind of like above the watermark of those standard tools.
Got it. Okay. And another question then is, so people are going to be uploading their leases. It's possible that their leases have sensitive information or
Yes.
personalized information. There are names and addresses and potentially social security numbers or other kinds of identifying information. What happens to the leases after they're uploaded? Is this just sitting on some server somewhere waiting to be hacked, or are you using it for other research or purposes? Or how are we thinking about that problem?
So we're thinking through the dynamics of that. One thing that we kind of benefit from is like people are not creating accounts on this. Like if I leave this and I go back to get LeaseWise, or sorry, yeah, here we go. It has no memory that I created that thing. So like there are no accounts here. We aren't storing your lease. You can't get your lease back, basically. Now, how that data is like structured in the back end, we're still kind of figuring out like what are our retention policies for this lease. But basically, we don't need the lease after they analyze it at all. And so again, I think that's kind of a benefit here, and one of the reasons why we don't want to create an account. Like we don't want to be a holder of leases necessarily. The other thing with the confidential information, again, I think like a lot of that can be dealt with through notices on the tool, like before you upload, saying, make sure to redact or take out any confidential information that like you don't want fed into this thing. Now, the way we're treating it too, we're figuring out ways to kind of like make it so that this data does not like flow back in to basically chat GPT. And so, a lot of that's kind of the construction of the tool. But again, these are all things that you have to like basically figure out with an AI tool like this, which is fun to do with all these students.
Okay, so you said earlier that one of the key problems is the second half, how to distribute that. So we've had a couple of questions that are essentially, so how do you distribute this? So assume we get this all figured out and you guys are able to nail things down and be ready to really want to go broad with this and feel confident about what we've produced. How are you going to try to distribute it and get the word out?
A lot of this is just like trial and error. We've already started that process. We've looked at community partners, for example, within Chicago. So we've like reached out to legal aid organizations and to churches and to schools, and to see is this something that you would benefit the people who you service? That actually I don't think is going to be like a fruitful route for us. Interestingly, because I think those units, like those organizations, are kind of worried about their own problems. Like this isn't really even a critique about them. Like schools have a lot of worries, especially like in let's say the south side of Chicago. Like this is probably not number one worry on their radar. And so like it's like hard for to be like, and use your resources to distribute this thing to your parents. Like it takes someone has to really buy in for you to have that. But we've tried. So we reached out to legal aid. Again, legal aid is like completely overburdened as is. It's very difficult to convince legal aid to like stop the critical work they're doing to like pay attention to a project that you're working on. And so but I think that the key is though, you just try lots of things and you go on the path of least resistance. Anything that works, you double down on. Anything that doesn't work, there's just no point in just banging your head against the wall trying to make it work. If it doesn't work and gain some traction pretty quickly, especially in a structure like this where you only have 2 months, you just need to let it go. You need to let it go. And so I think basically, I think that where we're going to get the most traction are kind of two ways. The first is word of mouth. That's always like the most powerful way. A lot of people have actually reached out and been like, how can I help with this project? And I think like the way that you could do that probably is by like spreading the word about the project, to people who in your life who are in leases, and like, hey, try this tool out, see if it's helpful to you. We want that feedback basically now. The other way is through PR. And so we're going to make a big PR push. We're going to try to send this out through news outlets. Like NBC Chicago is coming to visit the class in a couple weeks to do a profile on it. So we're going to try to push it out through PR as aggressively as we can. And we're already having some success there. But that's a lever that's nice because somebody can take a story and they can text it to someone who needs that tool. That's where we've gotten the most from the prior projects we did. We did one on debt collection that I mentioned. We did another project at BYU around eviction that was like this, except just much less powerful because we didn't have generative AI. And those tools got traction largely off PR. And so, we're going to try to put something in the New York Times or the USA Today or something. In fact, I had a call about it today. Trying to figure out how can we distribute this the widest possible because it has nationwide application. Yeah.
No, I mean, so one thing, and this will be the last question, that I loved where you started is that you're thinking about how you can solve access to justice problems so that people that can't afford lawyers or don't understand how to navigate the legal system per se can get easy to use tools to help them understand their rights, to argue on their own behalf, et cetera. So a lot of the questions that we got then are ideas about different ways that you might modify this or expand it or thinking about other areas. Is your vision that you're going to continue to just generalize those questions, thinking about how to continue to use AI for access to justice, either as part of the AI lab or 650 or your other enterprises? And is this an area you're going to continue to build out across all of these different domains?
I think that's something I want to do for the rest of my career, of my life, is basically taking the latest technology and look, whatever the latest technology is, businesses are going to figure out a way to make it benefit them. And people are going to build tools for businesses that really benefit them. Again, there are incredible coding tools, incredible, where someone like Adon in my class can take and build an entire app in 5 days. That is AI, very enterprising entrepreneurs taking AI and packaging it for businesses, really. I want to bring whatever that technology is, whether it's automation technology back when I was at BYU or AI now, or whatever the next iteration of it is in 20 years, and take that and give it to people. Give it to people and package it in a way that's they can use it in a safe, way, in an informed, safe way to benefit them and start to narrow that information asymmetry that's there between them and their landlord or them and another party who can afford an attorney. Our country is, in my mind, is kind of built on, liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. And I don't like to think of that as liberty and justice for those who have resources. I think that, again, one of the exciting things about AI is it can level that playing field. And but whatever technology it is, that's what I want to do. I think I want a professional life where I do things for businesses and I make money for myself and my family and my investors using that technology. But I don't just want to do that. I want to also take the things I learn and package it up for a person who can benefit from it, or hopefully millions of people so that they can benefit.
Man, I got to say, this is so exciting that this is happening in that we have this program now at the law school where our students are working directly with a tech CEO that's just coming off of a successful acquisition to learn about building a startup. They're learning about latest AI technology and how it can be used for the law. And at the same time, you're building a product that can help solve the access to justice problem, all in the format of a class. Obviously, I am deeply, deeply biased, but I just think this is so cool that this is happening. I'm really excited that you took the time to do this.
Well, what a perfect place to do it. U Chicago, again, I love it. I loved my time here as a student. I love all of my classmates. I just it's been so fun to track what my classmates are doing. I was just went to school with the most incredibly brilliant people. And then to come back and to see just how amazing these students are. And to have the support from the school. U Chicago really is like the most innovative law school in the nation, and it's just such a pleasure to be able to contribute to that. It's just like one of the joys of my career. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Kimball, for walking us through what's going on with the AI Lab. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Adam.